At the end of the day, you're competing. And so what I like to challenge CEOs out there with is how much are you spending on acquiring your next new customer and how valuable is that to your company? Contrast that with your next great hire and how much time and energy are you spending doing that? And if there's a big gap there or it's an obvious gap, then my recommendation is that they work to solve that.
Welcome to The Claw. I'm Cynthia Hayes. Today I'm joined by Kyle Tothill from eHire. He's the CEO and co-founder. And we uncover how marketing impacts employee retention and attraction, how you can find a great cultural fit in your next candidate, and just how much the industry has changed over the last few years in recruitment and employee retention. So join us. Welcome to The Claw. I'm Cynthia Hayes. This is the marketing podcast for the C-suite executive, and today I'm joined by Kyle Tothill. He's the co-founder and CEO of eHire. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, welcome to you. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So I thought what we could talk about today, it's been a minute since you've been here, and I'm filling in for Eric today, so I get to ask you whatever I want.
Substitute host.
Yeah.
I kind of like this version.
It could go a good direction.
We'll see.
Just saying, Eric. I thought what we maybe could talk about, given your expertise, I'd like you to share with everyone what eHire does
Sure.
and what your lane is, but then kind of get into how marketing impacts what you guys do.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I'm Kyle Tothill. I'm the CEO of eHire. We've been around for about 20 years or so. We help build technology and sales organizations for sales leaders and technology leaders around the country. We work with large companies, global enterprise companies, all the way down to small growth startups. We're headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we love what we do. So how does marketing help us? Marketing certainly helps us, get the message out for what we do and helps us get our expertise and our subject matter expertise into the hands of our customers and to our prospective customers and helps us engage them.
So this has been widely spread in the news. The great resignation, the quiet quit, all these things are happening in your area of expertise that are affecting your business directly. What have you seen? What have been those trends? And where are we now from your perspective as far as it goes to unemployment and hiring trends?
Very low unemployment. We had about 4 or 5 million opportunities that were open. And the supply chain was working, right? And business was kind of green lights across the board. And then we went into a pretty crazy unemployment spike with COVID. And then of course you have this long run up, and along with that long run up, you've had things like the Great Resignation, to put an emphasis on how crazy that's been. We had 20 million people quit their jobs in the Q3 of 2021. So it was extreme, and it was happening everywhere. And then of course, throughout all of these dynamics that we've had over the last couple of years, right, they've driven some new phenomenon like quiet quitting, which is really akin to, people, not going above and beyond, or people that are kind of traditionally kind of mailing it in or resigning their post, but not telling their their employers that they're resigning. So a lot of weirdness in the marketplace. And I think when you take a look at some of the crazy extremes, this year in 2022, in March, we had 11.5 million open jobs. So that's about double what we had open, or a little bit more than double what we had open in March or February of 2020. Pre-pandemic, right? And so when you pair that with COVID, pre-COVID unemployment parity, so it's about 3.6 right now, percent unemployment, it's just extreme.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of extreme conditions, things we've never seen before, a ton of career opportunities and liquidity opportunities for employees, a talent scarce market for companies, and it's just produced a lot of unique behaviors in the marketplace, right?
So how have you seen employers, or how do you guys encourage employers to attract candidates externally? Like, what do they need to look like? As from a marketing perspective, from
Sure.
a HR perspective, what does that look like to be attractive?
Well, number one, you got to be intentional, and so you have to understand that and recruiting top talent is kind of a comprehensive core competency of a company, and a lot of folks, have not considered their internal talent teams or their HR teams that traditionally have recruited folks as a value center for the organization.
Yeah.
I think the latest marketplace has really underscored the fact that a lot of people aren't very competent in terms of interviewing, recruiting, and so we've helped them to understand what good looks like, in terms of culture, in terms of candidate experience, in terms of messaging to those candidates, in terms of the interview experience, the feedback process, right? The recruiting partners that they use and channels that they use, the job orders that they push out, and then of course, making sure that the onboarding experience is seamless and they get rapid, quick cultural integration quickly. So the candidate experience really does extend through the hire and through onboarding and
It's like that first touch all the way through.
Yeah, it starts at the outreach, the initial outreach to that person or the job posting that they're responding to, all the way through the interview process. And you're competing. At the end of the day, you're competing. And so what I like to challenge CEOs out there with is how much are you spending on acquiring your next new customer and how valuable is that to your company? Contrast that with your next great hire and how much time and energy are you spending doing that? And if there's a big gap there or it's an obvious gap, then my recommendation is that they work to solve that.
Yeah, because it's crucial. These candidates too, whether they're hired or not, they now have an opinion of your company that they're going to go share probably with the person who says, "How did your interview go?"
That's right. Well, at the end of the day, most recruiting is done, I should say most professional recruiting is done and clients are looking for something very specific. So birds of a feather tend to flock together.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a very specific skill set in a very specific market, odds are there's going to be some cross connects between the people that you're reaching out to and the people that you want to have, interview in your company and the people who have had interviewed in your company. So they talk. A lot of the employment brand that you can create, right, does consist of candidate experience, right? And how are the people internally talking about what it's like to work there? So you can look, obvious places are like Glassdoor.
Reviews are crucial.
And a lot of the candidates are passive, right? And so, they're currently gainfully employed. And if they're employed and they get a bad review, like why take the risk, So you got to be very thoughtful about and intentional about the employee experience. You got to be very intentional about your employment brand. And I would say that they subdivide, whether that's executive, marketing, sales, technology, finance. There's different types of employment brands, different things that those personas want to see.
Sure. So when those different personas are looking at a company, what do they pay most attention to? The job board reviews like Glassdoor? Are they looking on LinkedIn? Where are they getting their external validation that you are as cool as you say you are as an employer?
I mean, one of the first things that they obviously, let's say, hey, go check the reviews that are out there on Glassdoor. That's an auto thing that they do right away. But then they start looking around YouTube and they start looking around Instagram. They look at their social posts and they start to get a feel and a vibe for who this company is. LinkedIn obviously is the center point, right? So if your LinkedIn presence is not up to snuff or you haven't made a post in a while or, you're not really active, a lot of folks will,
They may hesitate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you work with companies to make suggestions on, hey, we want to send some candidates your way, but I see this presence isn't quite up to where it should be. Do you guys get into that?
Sure.
Or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of the time, when I go through discovery with our clients, right, and, we talk about how serious they are.
Yeah.
And we try to identify gaps before we go out and rustle up, great talent,
Sure.
right? To be candid with you, the talent relationship for us is just as important as the client relationship.
Oh, sure.
Right. And so, we want to make sure that we're giving that candidate a great experience. And we may introduce them to multiple client companies. So we want our client rosters to be well organized, to be prepared.
Yeah.
And of course, there's gaps in every business. And when we see them, we certainly make those recommendations. whether it be, interview cycle, how people are talking about the job, if they're overweighting evaluation versus recruiting, how they're balancing those things in the process. You're absolutely right. We want the best possible outcome.
Yeah.
So,
And then oftentimes at Liger, we'll work with people who want to be considered a thought leader in their space, whether they're career transitioning or they're, looking to be promoted within their organization, or they want to catch somebody's eye, or they want to be on stages or whatever. So we're often addressing LinkedIn profiles.
oh yeah,
Right? Like how you position your personal brand. It needs to align with the company brand. If you're, a member of an organization already, do you, as you're working with the talent, do you guys help coach them on how they could present themselves,
Oh, yeah.
given what they're targeting? What are those conversations like?
Well, about half of our audience, our candidate audience, is in technology,
Yeah.
and they're generally pretty introverted.
What are you really saying?
So they're great engineers and
Yeah.
algorithmic scientists, and problem solvers, but often don't represent themselves in a complete sense. So when we talk to candidates, we spend a lot of time coaching them up, and making sure that their CVs are up to snuff or their LinkedIn profile properly represents that. But in the marketplace that we have today, you can base a lot about a person by where they work and what job they have. And how hard it is to work at that company or what type of work that company does.
Yeah.
So, but yes, of course we do. And we want them to be the most marketable version of themselves.
Sure. Yeah. That's fun. And you guys are fun to work with because we get to work with you.
Oh, thanks very much. I tell you what, we do love what we do. We love to help people change their lives for the better.
Yeah.
And we certainly love to help our client companies achieve their objectives. I know that sounds like podium speak, but it's totally true. We live that ethos every single day. And we have a very high consequence job. And we talk about that all the time, our core values.
Yeah.
So we take it seriously. I can tell you this right now. I can fix a mistake with a client company. I really can't fix somebody's life, right? And a job is such a huge part of someone's life. It affects marriages and partnerships and children and money and all of those
All
things.
the things.
And the time that they spend away. So, I never want to put somebody into a bad spot,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah.
That's kind of my lowest common denominator.
You do it very authentically at eHire because we've interacted with you guys.
Done it for a
several
long
years.
time. If
Yeah.
you do this business for a long time, you start to focus on outcomes and relationships.
You know what
right?
matters.
And that's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, I want to hear your philosophy on marketing and recruitment.
Cool.
Yeah.
Happy to.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger Partners. Liger Partners is a premier marketing firm where we save the world from boring, broken marketing. We get underdogs recognition because you deserve it. For more information, go to ligerpartners.com and follow us on all social media platforms at Liger Partners.
Before we went to break, you and I were talking about you have a philosophy around marketing and the work that you guys do, and I'm super curious to hear what's in the mind of the amazing Kyle.
Oh boy. Set the bar high there, right?
Yeah.
So one of the competencies that companies have really developed pretty well en masse is marketing. Specifically technology companies and growth companies, they're really good at it. And so are a lot of large organizations. But oftentimes, right, that mindset, that marketing mindset does not apply to recruiting, or the disciplines that are, that we know work in marketing aren't really applied to recruiting. Because it's an old traditional call center for companies, right? And so, I like to get organizations aligned internally between marketing and talent acquisition.
Okay.
And bring those great minds, because after all, it is sales,
Yes.
right? You're working just as hard to recruit top talent as you are your next customer, maybe even harder. It's just as impactful, right? And after all, candidates are, they're buyers, right? Saying yes and signing
They're buying
up for work.
into your brand.
They're
right?
buying into your brand. They're buying into your culture. They're buying into the promise that you're making for them, and vice versa. And they bring hope, right, to a new company, right? So it's exciting that way.
That's true.
And so, if you're in talent acquisition, I would love for you to just chat your marketing leader and say, hey, look, can we have an ideation session? We'd love for you guys to help us and apply some of your sciences and some of the things that you do and help us modernize, our approach.
Our approach.
If you think about it, I'll just ask you a question. I'll use a Fortune 500 bottler of sugar water here in Atlanta.
Excellent.
How many people do you think have applied to that company in the last 23 years digitally?
A gajillion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a ton of data.
Yeah.
It's a ton of opportunity for the marketing staff. So using things like that, right, to sit down and talk to your marketing team, like, hey, what can we do with this? We want to engage this audience. We know that there's gold in them our hills, if you will, and making your life easier. And data suggests that if a company's interacted with your brand on LinkedIn, or they're following you on social, or they've applied to an open opportunity, they'll respond to outreach from you way better at a much higher percentage than they would if you just did a cold outreach.
It's interesting, too, to think about. So you've put a message out there for an open position. You're receiving all these applications, these candidates coming in, and maybe they're not the right candidate. So clearly you've misaligned your messaging.
Most of the time, they're not.
And it could be that they're just applying blindly for everything because LinkedIn makes it super easy. But it could be that your messaging isn't correct. Like, you're not articulating well who you're looking for.
That's right. You should be filtering out in a way with your job description, but you should also be really, really focused on attracting the right persona, right, and the right person. But at the end of the day,
cultural fit, because that's tricky.
It's hard to do that on job descriptions.
Yeah.
It's mostly once you're interviewing, you're selecting or screening for that, and that's really important. But you can put your core values out there. You can put what's exciting about the organization. You can definitely put what you stand for, and I think that attracts the right people. And I don't think I would be scared of that at all. You definitely don't want more when you start talking about job postings or circulating job descriptions. And by the way, I'll just say job descriptions are not a marketing tool, but a lot of people use them as such.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just old, it's just an old way of thinking about it. But and that's why I want marketing to come in and put a spin on that, because the first thing they're going to say is, ew, right? What is this? It's not talking to anybody.
Know your audience.
Right.
Your audience doesn't want to see this
brochure. Well, and they're just not going to respond to
Yeah.
it. Fortunately, they've been conditioned to do so. And so, there's some places out there like Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever where you can post your opportunities and get candidates. The challenge is that I would rather have 5 really good submissions come through on one of those versus 350, which is kind of your average.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about it, you have to open those resumes, you have to read those applications, and you have to go through that. And so, if anybody's ever sat down and gone through a list of resumes or applications, it can be quite time consuming.
It really is.
And you get fatigued really, really fast. If anybody's ever done an interview day blitz, they know it's like, why am I so tired? It's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
What we do is exhausting. But you definitely want to filter out as best as you possibly can. And I say that reverently in a filter in market. You want more options, but you want more of the right options.
Right.
Because the time constraints and the error rate gets really, really, really high with the more volume that you get.
So what do you see? We touched on culture. What do you see there's external marketing that you can do to present your brand in an authentic way that can attract the right candidate pool to you when a position is open, and when they're working with the fine folks at eHire. And then there's that internal piece. You've touched on the candidate's experience when they're interacting with your actual people, going through maybe several interviews, meeting a panel of people, whatever
Sure.
that looks like. The internal culture, how that's represented and communicated, is also something that we geek out about at Liger.
Yep.
So that's
Very effective here.
it's something we dig our own culture.
That's right.
We're big fans of ourselves. It's true.
Imagine that.
But what is that experience like? What's a best practice? How do you see companies treating candidates well in an authentic way as they're going through that process that represents a culture well?
Most of the time, it's a pretty broken and fragmented process. Most of the time, it's not curated. Good companies have figured out that they need to have a process. They need to have good feedback loops. They need to be intentional about it. But it's hard to do, right? So you're asking,
It's
a
more
hiring
time.
manager.
It's time consuming on top of the time consuming thing you're already doing.
That's right. And so prioritizing and emphasizing how important it is has to come from the top. Right. So if it's your HR leader or your talent leader telling you got to have your act together, that's one thing, and that's important. It's another thing if the CEO is telling you that this is really critically important and you need to take this action, right, as intentionally as you would your current craft, and you're going to be judged on it. Not a lot of people are measured on how good they interview or how well they carry the process. I'd argue almost none.
Who's even been trained on how to interview?
It's a great mystery, right? So
Yeah.
career management and interviewing and assessment and selection strategies are not taught in colleges, shockingly, right? It's one of the things that I've been advocating for at some of the universities that I work with. But it's a learned skill, and best practices are there for you if you research them. I like behavioral interviews. I like the STAR interview. I'm a big fan of that. Situation, task, action, result. Helps you get down to brass tacks. And I teach my candidates to talk like that so that they can express themselves
In a meaningful way.
Yeah, but far too often you have a lot of biases that develop in an interview process, right? Which is recency bias. Like, what have you been doing the last couple of years? That's what matters, right? So I'm not going to dig deep, or I'm going to do all the talking as an interviewer and not let you talk, or I'm not going to evaluate you properly, or I'm going to under recruit and over evaluate. So the best thing that you can do is have a process. Get your talent team, and your HR team to put together something that's manageable from a time perspective, easy and efficient, but produces consistency. Right, I've seen a lot of my hiring managers interview the first candidate, give them an A, and after they get done, give that person a C. And I'm like, hold on a second, you just haven't talked to them in a couple 3 weeks. Why a C now? Why not an A then? And so you have all kinds of things that creep into the interview process that, quite frankly, aren't fair, that aren't scientific, and that probably shouldn't be there and distort your outcomes.
Right. Because it can be so subjective when we're people, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of biases that people have, and I'm not talking about the bad type. I'm just talking about normal things, right, that disrupt their ability to make selections. Most people are not particularly good at hiring people. They're not. They're either good at recruiting, but they're terrible at evaluation. They're really good at evaluation, but they're terrible at recruiting.
Haven't really been trained well on how to evaluate,
So what we do is we say, hey, if you've arrived at a VP level, you must be good at hiring people.
You must know what you're doing.
And some people do, but most people don't.
Yeah. Or some people can evaluate, like I can, at Liger, we're evaluating, what does your portfolio, your visual graphic design portfolio look like? Like you can show me some of those skills. But then the cultural fit is a whole nother thing because there's certain things about working in a marketing agency you just have to enjoy or it will drive you crazy to be here.
That's right. That's exactly right. One of the things that I would recommend that the audience really, make sure, if there's one thing I could let them leave with,
please.
It would be candidates value consistency in the interview process. So if I talk to you versus talking to the next person at Liger and you're carrying the same water, talking about the same thing, expressing the similar interest and mission that the other person did and show the same passion, that's the biggest engagement tool that you can have in recruiting.
And that takes intentionality from an employer's perspective.
Training,
repeating, engaging their own employees, beating the drum of this is who we are, this is our culture, right?
And most people hire by committee.
Yes.
Certainly they hire, I'm going to say high value, high impact employees by a committee.
Yes.
And so it's really a team. It's a hiring team, not necessarily just a hiring manager and some supporting cast.
Right.
And it's just hardly ever orchestrated that way. And, as a result, companies like us stay in business. So
job security.
Don't fix it all.
No, but you guys are experts. What I love about what I learned early on working with eHire is the different candidate pools that you work with. A lot of them are, like you alluded to earlier, just passively seeking. They're like, oh, if the right opportunity presents itself, I might be interested, but I'm not actively looking, right? Because they're good at what they're doing. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
Is that still really true for you guys?
The passively active market is kind of like, I'll describe it like you're house hunting on Zillow, but you're not really thinking about.
Oh my gosh, this was
right.
This
Buying
was
a house.
really
but
my
if
life.
a really smoking deal came up, you might say, talk talk to your partner and make a deal, right? Or you know, when you're thinking about buying a new car and you're driving around and you start to notice the cars that you like on the road, right? I could see myself in that. That's kind of that passively active phase change that people get into. The pool is broader now than it normally has been. So it's about 40% of people are passively active versus 25% before. Active is, hey, I'm gonna get a new job. I've got my resume together. I got my list together. I know what I want. I'm in the marketplace. Passively active candidates are like the ones I just described, and the passive candidates are like, hey man, I just started my new company, or I really love it here, and it's gonna take a lot for me to even consider leaving. And most of the time, they've toggled off of receiving phone calls or taking in mails.
Gotcha. But you'll check in a year or so and see how it's going. Is that
we're persistent with our relationships. We try to find ways to communicate with them. We talk to them at community events or wherever we can get an opportunity to check in. We ask them for referrals all the time. We try to stay top of mind with them. The most important thing that we ask of the people that we care about is they answer our phone call when we call them. And we try to make sure that that's an intentional, value-based phone call rather than just call me when you're looking for a job. If you're calling me when you're looking for a job, that's great. That's not what my expectation is. My expectation is you're going to call me, right, when you need advice, counsel, or you'll take my phone call when I call you.
Yeah, and that's part of the eHire brand,
It
right?
is.
You guys have that human touch. It's about the relationships. It's a long term. It's not I just need you to fill this thing for this person, right? It's a long term value add relationship.
We try to be that way, and it's hard. That takes a lot of energy for us, but we love it, right? And the people that work for our company love to engage with smart, intelligent people. They're curious, right? They want to know, right? They're interested, and that's one of the cool things about being in our industry is that you get to touch so many different types of clients, and there's the addressable market is, quite honestly, it's unlimited. There is no limit to the addressable market in our space. So you get to talk to all kinds of different folks, and they tell you what they're doing, and it's exciting, right? I'm not an engineer, but I love what engineering can do.
Yes.
I'm curious about it, or sales techniques or sales leadership challenges. I'm interested in that stuff.
So you get to learn from the best as you learn about their mad skills, right?
Indeed, and I'm always impressed. It's you get to learn something new, and that's what's exciting. It's never the same thing every day.
Right. Yeah. We geek out over our clients' different industries. Everyone has their own niche, and they have their own really cool story of how they got there. You're like, oh, that's such a cool problem you solve. I hadn't even thought of that because I'm not in that space. So we're lifelong learners.
Indeed,
sure.
I think you have to be in general. Right?
Yeah.
I think
to keep things interesting, or you'd get bored.
If you take a look at some of the folks that that disengage, maybe when they retire, you can see the change that manifests in them, and it's different, and it's taught me a lot about loving that fire that comes out of the work that I do every day, and living off of that heat, and I love it, it gets me excited.
Yeah, it's never the same.
Never.
No 2 days are ever the same.
Never.
Not when you deal with people. Yeah.
No, not when marketing conditions go from, crazy to uncrazy and sad to crazy again. And, it's
to a different crazy, to fun, to what?
We had 70% of our business stop in 10 days of COVID.
Ugh.
And we're bigger now than we were then. So
that's amazing.
It's insane.
It really is. Yeah. We were surprised by the clients that we retained during COVID and the ones that didn't, and it's just like
it goes to show you don't make any assumptions about the future. Put your head down, go to work, right? Love your customers, and we had a lot of clients that took care of us, that were really special to us,
Nice.
That we had worked really hard to earn that respect, and when they delivered that to us, I get kind of emotional about it because we were like a boxer on the ropes. I mean, it just was just a massive demand shock, right? Yeah, exactly. And so all of the work that we had put in and all the investment that we had put in relationships and all the good work that we focused on really came through and carried us through the night. And now we're just energized by that love and passion that we have for our customers.
That's so great. And the sky's the limit, right?
There is no limit.
Love it.
Just go till you drop.
Literally, some days, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, thank you, Kyle. Thanks for joining.
That's fun.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you as
Great
always.
job. I'm voting for permanent host.
Oh, see? You've got competition, sir.
Eric, you better watch out. Someone's got your seat.
This has been The Claw with Kyle Tothill from eHire. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Claw Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And if you or someone you know wants to make an appearance on this show, email us at yourbestie@ligerpartners.com.